There was a kitchen knife on the floor outside my bedroom door. I stood there staring at it, and I knew she had been holding it while she watched us sleep. I didn't understand yet how long she'd been standing there, or how many nights before that. But I was about to find out. Let me tell you how we got there. I have worked in mental health care for 18 years, mainly with people with psychotic illnesses, schizophrenia, severe disorders, the full spectrum. For 9 of those years, I worked at a group home, and I got close with my coworkers the way you do when you're in the trenches together. 3 of us in particular became a tight unit, and then a 4th joined us. I'll call her M. M was timid, shy, friendly. She was often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health, so we didn't always overlap at work. But she showed up at every after-work dinner, every gathering. She told us she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients we were treating, but that she was medicated and that she hadn't had a psychotic episode in years. I have an education in psychiatry. I've sat with people through their worst moments. I had no judgment toward M, and I want to be clear. Even after everything I'm about to tell you, I still don't. By the summer of 2023, I had moved on to a new position in forensic psychiatry, a halfway house for mentally ill individuals who had committed serious crimes. The 4 of us still stayed in touch, still met for dinner every now and then. And that's when M told us she'd been evicted. She said she had accidentally walked into her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. The doors in her complex all looked the same, she said. She walked in the wrong one. The neighbors overreacted, called the police, and the landlord used it as grounds to remove her. She seemed genuinely hurt by it. I felt bad for her. I even wondered if the landlord had treated her unfairly because of her diagnosis. I asked her directly if something else had happened, and she said no. That was the full story. In Sweden, an eviction record essentially blacklists you from renting. Getting a new apartment contract after that is nearly impossible. She had nowhere to go. So when she asked if she could move in with me, I said yes. I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself first. I had no idea how serious this one would become. My apartment is small. 1 bedroom, a living room just big enough for a couch and a television, a small kitchen, a small bathroom, 2 cats. We decided M would sleep on the couch in the living room. I offered to replace it with a proper bed. I pushed on this, but she declined. There's a door between my bedroom and the living room, and another door from my bedroom directly into the kitchen. I hung a thick velvet curtain over the open entryway on her side to give her some privacy. I kept the kitchen door open at night for my cats, since their food, water, and litter boxes were in those rooms. The coffee machine sat right outside my bedroom door. The kitchen is that small. I have severe insomnia. I take 2 medications just to have a chance at sleeping, and I still wake up easily. I also have epilepsy, and when I don't get enough sleep, I seize. I was working shifts at a forensic facility, sometimes up at 6 in the morning, sometimes not home until 11 at night. I asked M, as gently as I could, if she could try to stay quiet on the mornings when I had early shifts. The first night, she made coffee at 5 in the morning. The machine was right outside my door. I was awake instantly. I asked her as nicely as I could if she could wait until 6. She said she really needed coffee with her cigarettes, but she'd try next time. She never tried. She continued waking me up. Early mornings, middle of the night. Every time she went out to smoke, every time she ran the machine, She kept promising to stop. She never stopped. And in the meantime, she told me she needed silence by 10 p.m., and I respected that without question. She had episodes of binge eating where she'd go through everything I had: my full fridge, my pantry, a whole loaf of bread in 30 minutes while I was at work. She'd text me afterward to say she was sorry and she'd pay me back when she had money. I had told her when she moved in that she was welcome to whatever I had. So I didn't say anything, but I came home hungry after evening shifts to find an empty kitchen, repeatedly. Her hair was everywhere, long, black, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. She left her nail clippings on the bathroom floor. There were pee drops on the toilet seat every time she'd been in. I started seeing silverfish, which feed on exactly that kind of buildup. I put a broom and dustpan in the bathroom, hoping she'd take the hint. When that didn't work, I brought it up as gently as I could, using we instead of you, so she wouldn't feel attacked. She said she'd think about it. Nothing changed. I was dating someone, and we had no space to be together. He was also in a shared living situation. I asked M if we could have one night alone in the apartment every now and then, and offered that she'd get her own nights too. She said she had nowhere to go. Not to a friend's, not to family. Not even for a few hours. To a library, a walk, anywhere. One of our other coworkers offered to have her over. We both assured her she wasn't a burden. M eventually agreed. When I came home the morning after, my cat's water bowl was completely dry. No spill on the floor. It looked like it had been wiped clean. I'd filled it to the brim before I left. I asked M what happened, and she said the cats must have knocked it over. There was no water anywhere on the floor. My cats had always been overly social. They'd warm up to strangers in minutes. Over the weeks, I watched them pull back from M more and more until they stopped coming out of my bedroom at all, except to eat and use the litter box. They seemed scared of her. I couldn't understand why. Then she ruined my grandmother's saucepan. It was from the 1960s. The only thing I had that belonged to my grandmother. The pan my mother used to cook for me when I was little. M burnt it, left it on the stove, walked out to smoke, and never said she was sorry. She broke dishes too, more than once, and never replaced them or acknowledged it. 2 months in, I also discovered that my prescription sleeping pills were gone. I'd had 20 of them in my nightstand. I came home from work and they were missing. M denied taking them. She was the only one who had been there. That was when my old elementary school classmate messaged me on Facebook. He'd seen that I posted about us being roommates. He asked me if I knew why she'd really been evicted. I told him what she'd told me, that she'd accidentally walked into the wrong apartment. He said, "That's not the full story. She had broken in, and she'd approached their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand. The father woke up in time and was able to stop her." My classmate had the full police report. The couple she'd broken into were people he knew. I felt sick. She had been living in my apartment, with my cats, with access to my kitchen, 3 feet from where I slept. And she had done that. I wanted her out. But we had a contract with 30 days' notice, and I knew that if I handled this badly, those 30 days would be unbearable. I sat down with her and told her, as calmly as I could, that I loved living with her, that I felt terrible about this. But the apartment was too small for 2 people, and I needed my space back. I said it wasn't personal. I showed her a hostel I'd found. She looked crushed. She said she'd move out, but not before the 30 days were up. I said, of course. That night, She made coffee at 2:30 in the morning. I had to be up at 6. The next morning I asked her, for probably the 10th time. She sat on the couch and stared out the window. I said her name. She kept staring. I left for work. I eventually unplugged the coffee machine and stored it in the attic, somewhere she couldn't access. I know how that sounds. But I was barely sleeping, my pills had been stolen, and I was running out of options. The next night she made coffee in a saucepan on the stove. When I tried to talk to her about it, she stared through me and said nothing. I stored the saucepan in the attic, too. The third night, I had the man I was dating over. I was paranoid about her behavior, the silence, the staring, and I didn't want to be alone. I was in a light sleep when he poked me. He whispered, "Look." M was standing in the doorway, still, silent, her long black hair falling forward over her face. Just watching us. I waited, watching her back, to see if she was just passing through. She wasn't moving at all. I sat up and said her name, and before I could finish the sentence, she slammed the door shut. I heard something metal hit the floor. Then I heard her run into the living room. I yelled for her to leave, and then I cried because I finally understood what I was dealing with. We didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I opened the bedroom door. A kitchen knife was on the floor. That was the metal sound I'd heard. I took every knife I owned and locked them in the attic. I asked a friend to come over and be present when I told M she needed to leave immediately. Not in 27 days. Now. I stayed calm. I know she has a mental illness. I knew even then that she wasn't choosing this. But I was scared and I was exhausted and I needed her out of my home. She didn't answer me. She stared at the window the entire time. Then she left the apartment and sent me a text saying I had been disrespectful for bringing a friend to her place. That night, at 3 in the morning, she woke me by burning dry coffee powder in a frying pan on the stove. Her face was completely flat. Her eyes were empty. I put out the fire. She walked back into the living room without a word. I knew she had a psychiatry appointment the next morning. While she was gone, I packed her things. I texted her that her belongings were ready, that I would give her money to cover the hostel for the remaining 26 days, and that I needed my keys back. She came back with the man she'd been seeing. She left the keys without looking at me and walked out. Our mutual co-workers told me she'd moved in with that man and that she'd eventually, somehow, secured her own apartment. She went back to work. She seemed to be doing well. Then, in January of this year, one of our old coworkers called me. M had contacted her saying that everything had to burn, that she had a baby to save. Delusional, urgent, frightening. Our coworker had called emergency services. They didn't take it seriously. M burned her apartment down. Her neighbors tried to pull her out. She fought them off, ran back in, and poured liquor on the fire. She was arrested. She was sentenced last week. Aggravated arson. She'll serve her time in a psychiatric facility, likely for a very long time, possibly permanently. There is something strange about this ending that I don't quite know how to sit with. The facility where she'll likely be placed is the same one where I used to work. The same one where she used to work. At the trial, it came out that she had stopped taking her medication, Abilify, because she felt it made her numb. She believed she was stable enough without it. She had also stopped taking it in the final weeks she spent in my apartment. When she stood in that doorway watching me sleep, She was in a psychosis. When she stared out the window and stopped speaking, she was in a psychosis. When she burned the coffee powder at 3 in the morning with empty eyes, she was in a psychosis. And the knife on the floor. I think about that baby, the one she'd gone to before she was evicted. I think about my cats who understood something I didn't, long before I did. I think about how easily I could have been a heavy sleeper. I think about those 30 days I'd agreed to give her, and what might have happened if I'd kept that promise. People ask why I didn't throw her out sooner. It's complicated, and that's the truest answer I have. I cared about her. I understood that she was ill, not cruel, and I kept believing, right up until I couldn't anymore, that it wasn't as serious as it felt. My gut was telling me long before my head caught up, but my gut was right. If something about this story has stayed with you, the knife, the staring, the moment the door slammed, drop a comment. I read them. A like helps someone else find their way here. And if you want to hear more stories where someone's instincts were the only thing standing between them and something much worse, subscribe. I'll be here.